When 17-year-old Mercy Whitfield sweeps the same weathered porch every dawn in 1867 Nebraska Territory, she believes the prairie wind only brings dust and her father's drunken rage, until a lonely rancher's storm-gray eyes show her that some winds carry the seeds of escape. As Silas Whitfield's fists tighten around his daughter's life and a marriage certificate becomes her only path to freedom, one question remains. Can love born from desperation ever become love born from choice? Blood dripped from Mercy's split lip onto the dusty floorboards as her father's heavy boots stomped past her hiding spot behind the flour barrels. The 17-year-old girl pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of their general store, counting the seconds until Silas Whitfield would either forget his anger or find something else to hit. "Where's my breakfast, you lazy girl?" His voice boomed through the cramped Nebraska Territory store like thunder before a storm. Empty whiskey bottles clinked together as he kicked them aside, searching for his leather belt. Mercy knew that sound too well. She wiped the blood away with her torn sleeve and stood up slowly. Moving too fast would make him angrier. Moving too slow would make him think she was being smart with him. After 17 years of walking this careful line, she had learned to read his moods like weather signs. "Coming, Papa," she whispered, her voice barely loud enough for him to hear. The morning sun threw long shadows across the store's wooden floor through the dirty windows. Outside, the endless prairie grass bent in the wind like it was bowing to something powerful and unseen. Mercy hurried to the small kitchen area behind the store counter. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold planks. The bacon was already cooked and waiting, along with eggs and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She had learned to prepare everything before he woke up, but sometimes even that wasn't enough to keep his hands off her. "About time," Silas grunted, dropping his thick body into the only good chair they owned. At 45, he looked older than the oldest man in town. His black hair was streaked with gray, and his face was red from too much drinking. Once, Mercy's mother had told her that Silas used to smile and laugh. That was before the baby sister who never took a breath, before Mama died trying to give him the son he wanted. Mercy set the plate in front of him without looking at his face. Looking at him wrong could start another beating. She had learned that lesson when she was 8 and still thought fathers were supposed to protect their daughters. "The Henderson family stopped by yesterday while you were sleeping," she said carefully. "They need supplies for their cattle drive next week. Mrs. Henderson said she'd pay cash." Silas looked up from his food, his small eyes sharp with interest. Cash was hard to come by in their part of Nebraska Territory. Most folks paid with chickens or promises or work they never finished. "How much cash?" he asked, gravy running down his chin. $25. Maybe 30 if we can find them extra rope and horseshoes." "Good." He went back to eating, making loud noises that turned Mercy's stomach. "You'll help them load everything, and you'll count every penny they give us." Mercy nodded and started cleaning the kitchen. She had learned to stay busy when he was eating. Idle hands made him think she was being lazy, and lazy girls got taught lessons with his belt. Through the window, she could see the town of Cedar Falls waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys as families started their day. Children ran between houses, chasing dogs and playing games she had never been allowed to play. Sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to run without fear, to laugh without checking first if it was safe. "I'm riding to Omaha tomorrow," Silas announced, pushing his empty plate away. "Business to take care of. You'll mind the store and keep your mouth shut about our affairs." "Yes, Papa." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the prairie that stretched beyond the edges of the world. "This land owes me something," he muttered. "Promised me riches when I came west. All I got was a dead wife and a daughter who can't do anything right." Mercy's hands stopped moving. She had heard these words before, but they still hit her like physical blows. In her father's mind, she was the reason for every bad thing that had happened to him. She was the reason Mama died. She was the reason the store barely made money. She was the reason he drank himself to sleep every night. "I'm sorry, Papa," she whispered, even though she didn't know what she was sorry for. He turned around and looked at her with eyes that held no love, no warmth, nothing but anger that had been growing for 17 years. "Sorry doesn't fix anything," he said. Sorry doesn't bring back your mother or make you the son I needed. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Mercy felt something inside her chest crack a little more, the way ice cracks when spring comes too fast. She had spent her whole life trying to be good enough, trying to make him proud, trying to earn just one kind word. But good enough never came, and proud never happened, and kind words were as rare as rain in August. Get this place cleaned up, Silas ordered, grabbing his hat from the hook by the door. I'm going to check on the Henderson order. He left without another word, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. Mercy stood alone in the sudden quiet, listening to the sound of his horse's hooves fading away. Only then did she let herself cry. The tears came silently, the way she had learned to cry when she was small and afraid. Making noise when she was sad only made him angrier. Everything she did seemed to make him angrier. She walked to the cracked mirror hanging beside the door and looked at her reflection. The girl staring back had brown hair that needed washing and green eyes that looked older than 17. The bruise on her cheek from yesterday was turning purple, and her lip was swollen from this morning's slap. But underneath the marks of his anger, she could see something else. Something that looked almost like hope. What would happen if she left? The thought came suddenly, like a bird landing on a fence post. What if she just walked out of Cedar Falls and kept walking until she found a place where nobody knew her name or her shame? But the thought scared her more than staying. The world outside Cedar Falls was big and dangerous, full of men who might be worse than her father. At least here, she knew what to expect. She knew how to duck when he swung, how to stay quiet when he drank, how to make herself small when his anger filled up all the space in their tiny world. A knock at the door made her jump. She quickly wiped her eyes and smoothed her hair, trying to look normal. When she opened the door, Mrs. Henderson stood on the porch with a basket of eggs. Good morning, dear, the older woman said, her kind eyes taking in Mercy's swollen lip and bruised cheek. I brought these for your father. Trade for some sugar if you have it. Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Please come in. The woman stepped inside and looked around the store. Her gaze lingered on the empty whiskey bottles that Silas had left scattered around the floor. Is your father here, child? He rode out to check on supplies. He'll be back soon. Mrs. Henderson nodded, but her expression was troubled. Mercy, honey, are you all right? You look like you haven't been sleeping well. The kindness in her voice almost broke Mercy's careful control. When was the last time someone had asked if she was all right? When was the last time someone had called her honey instead of girl or lazy or worse? I'm fine, she lied, the words coming automatically. Just tired from inventory work. But Mrs. Henderson wasn't fooled. She reached out and gently touched Mercy's shoulder, the first gentle touch the girl had felt in months. If you ever need anything, dear, anything at all, you come find me. The Henderson Ranch is always open to folks who need a safe place. The words hit Mercy like a revelation. A safe place. Did such things really exist? Before she could answer, the sound of hoofbeats outside made them both turn toward the window. But it wasn't Silas returning. A stranger rode toward the store, tall and lean in his saddle, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Looks like you have a customer, Mrs. Henderson said. But something in her voice suggested she recognized the rider. That's Caleb Morrison. He's starting a ranch about 20 miles north of here. Mercy watched through the window as the man dismounted. He moved with careful grace, like someone who had learned to be gentle with frightened animals. When he looked toward the store, she caught a glimpse of eyes the color of storm clouds, and something inside her chest fluttered like a trapped bird trying to find its way to freedom. The stranger's boots made soft sounds on the wooden porch steps, nothing like her father's heavy stomping. Mercy found herself holding her breath as Caleb Morrison pushed open the store door, bringing with him the smell of leather and prairie grass and something else she couldn't name, something that reminded her of safety. Morning, ladies, he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair that looked like it had been trimmed by his own hand. His voice was quiet, rough from not being used very much. I'm looking for supplies. Heard this was the best store in Cedar Falls. Mrs. Henderson smiled. Mercy here knows where everything is. I'll leave you two to business. She squeezed Mercy's hand before leaving, whispering, "Remember what I said, dear." Alone with the stranger, Mercy felt suddenly aware of how she must look. Her dress was patched and faded. Her hair was falling out of its braid, and the bruises on her face told stories she didn't want anyone to read. "What can I help you find?" she asked, keeping her eyes down. "Starting a ranch," Caleb said simply. "Need nails, rope, coffee, flour, the usual things." He paused, and she could feel him studying her face. "That's a nasty bruise you have there. Looks fresh." Mercy's hand flew to her cheek. "I fell," she said quickly. "Clumsy me." Caleb didn't say anything for a long moment. When she risked a glance at his face, she saw something there that surprised her. Not pity exactly, but understanding. Like he knew what it felt like to tell lies about bruises. "I'll get your supplies," she said, turning away from those knowing eyes. As she gathered items from the shelves, Caleb wandered around the store. He didn't touch things without asking, didn't make demands or complaints. He just looked at everything with the patient attention of someone who was used to taking care of things. "You keep a neat store," he said. "Shows respect for the goods and the customers." The compliment hit Mercy like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had said something nice about her work? Her father only noticed when things were wrong, never when they were right. "Thank you," she whispered. "How long have you been running this place?" "Since Mama died. About 10 years now." The words came out before she could stop them. That's a heavy load for someone so young. Mercy paused in her counting. Was he making fun of her? But when she looked at his face, she saw only genuine concern. This stranger cared more about her feelings than her own father ever had. "I manage," she said. "I'm sure you do." Caleb picked up a bag of flour, testing its weight. "Takes strength to manage a store and take care of family both." Family. The word sounded strange when he said it. Mercy wasn't sure she and her father counted as family anymore. They were more like two people trapped in the same cage, with only one of them holding the key. "Where's your ranch?" she asked, trying to change the subject. "North of here. Found a good spot near a creek, with plenty of grass for cattle. It's quiet, peaceful." He said the word peaceful like it was something precious and rare. "That sounds nice." And it did sound nice. Mercy tried to imagine what peaceful felt like, but she couldn't remember ever feeling it. "Gets lonely sometimes," Caleb admitted. "But lonely's better than—" He stopped himself, but Mercy understood. Lonely was better than afraid. Lonely was better than hurt. Lonely was better than walking on broken glass every day, waiting for the next pane to fall. The door banged open, and Silas Whitfield stormed in like a thundercloud. His eyes went immediately to Caleb, sizing him up like a threat. "What's this?" he demanded. "Customer, Papa," Mercy said quickly. "Mr. Morrison is buying supplies for his ranch." Silas looked Caleb up and down, taking in the worn but clean clothes, the steady way he stood, the money visible in his hand. "Cash or credit?" "Cash," Caleb said simply. Silas's mood improved immediately. "Well then, you're welcome here anytime." "Mercy, total up his order." As Mercy added up the prices, she was aware of both men watching her. Her father's gaze was sharp with greed, calculating how much profit he could make. But Caleb's attention felt different. He was watching her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were worth considering. "Comes to $8.50, she announced. Caleb counted out the money carefully, his fingers brushing hers as he handed over the coins. His skin was rough from work but warm, and the brief contact sent a strange feeling through her arm. "Thank you," he said, and she knew he wasn't just talking about the supplies. "You need help loading that onto your horse?" Silas asked, suddenly helpful now that money had changed hands. "I can manage," Caleb said, but instead of leaving immediately, he turned back to Mercy. "If you ever need anything, Miss Whitfield, anything at all, my ranch is 20 miles north on the creek road. Anyone in town can give you directions." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. Mercy wanted to grab it, to say yes, to ask him to take her away from this place right now. But fear kept her frozen in place. "That's very kind," she managed to say. Caleb loaded his supplies and mounted his horse. Before riding away, he looked back at the store one more time. His storm-gray eyes met hers through the window, and in that moment, Mercy felt something she had never felt before. She felt seen. Not just looked at, but truly seen, like someone had finally noticed that she was a person with her own thoughts and dreams and worth. "Strange fellow," Silas muttered, counting the money again. "Too quiet. Don't trust quiet men." But Mercy barely heard him. She was still thinking about the way Caleb had said her name, like it was something valuable instead of something to be ashamed of. She was thinking about his offer, about a ranch 20 miles north where someone lived who thought she deserved kindness. For the first time in years, Mercy Whitfield allowed herself to imagine a different life. That night, as she lay on her thin mattress listening to her father's drunken snoring, she stared at the ceiling and whispered Caleb's words back to herself. "If you ever need anything, anything at all." The words were like a secret treasure, something beautiful and dangerous that she could hold close to her heart. Outside her small window, the prairie wind blew through the grass, and for once, it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like a promise, like something was coming to change everything she thought she knew about her life. The question was, would she be brave enough to grab it when it came? A white envelope with careful handwriting lay on the store counter like a snake ready to strike. Mercy stared at it while sweeping, knowing her father would find it before she ever got the chance to touch it. 3 weeks had passed since Caleb Morrison's visit. 3 weeks of wondering if she had imagined the kindness in his storm-gray eyes. "Girl, what's this fancy paper doing in my store?" Silas stomped over from the whiskey bottles he'd been counting. His face was already red from morning drinking, which meant the day would be long and dangerous for Mercy. She set down her broom slowly. "It came with the mail delivery, Papa. Someone wrote it to me." Silas snatched the envelope before her fingers could even brush it. His thick thumbs tore it open roughly, caring nothing for the neat way someone had folded the paper inside. As he read, his expression changed from anger to confusion to something that might have been greed. "Some rancher wants to hire you for housework," he said, waving the letter like evidence of a crime. $15 a month plus room and board. Says you impressed him with your store management." Mercy's heart hammered against her ribs. $15 was more money than she'd ever held in her hands. More than that, it was freedom spelled out in careful black ink. What kind of man writes letters to girls he barely knows? Silas's voice turned dangerous. What kind of business is he really offering? "Papa, I only met him once. He bought supplies and was polite, nothing more." Mercy kept her voice steady, but inside she was screaming with hope and terror. Silas read the letter again, his lips moving as he worked through the words. 20 miles north. That's Morrison's place. Heard he's got good land, pays his debts on time. His small eyes calculated possibilities. $15 would help with the store expenses. "I could send the money home every month," Mercy offered carefully. "Help you build up the business." "You think I need charity from my own daughter?" His hand moved toward his belt, and Mercy stepped back automatically. But then his expression shifted again, weighing anger against profit. "How do I know you won't run off? How do I know you'll keep your end of the bargain?" "Where would I run to, Papa? This is the only home I've ever known." The lie came easily. In truth, Mercy had spent every night since Caleb's visit dreaming of running. She imagined walking north along the creek road until she found a place where no one would hit her for breathing wrong or looking up too quickly. "You'll come back every Sunday," Silas decided suddenly. "Miss one visit, and I'll come get you myself. And this rancher better understand that you're still my daughter, still under my authority." Mercy nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Sunday visits meant she wouldn't be completely free, but 6 days a week away from her father's fists felt like a miracle. "When does he want an answer?" Silas asked. "The letter says I can start whenever I'm ready." "Then you'll start Monday." Today's Thursday, so you have time to pack your things and finish your chores here. He folded the letter and put it in his shirt pocket, claiming ownership of even her correspondence. Don't get any ideas about this arrangement, girl. You're going there to work, not to play at being some rancher's wife. Heat flooded Mercy's cheeks. I never thought. Good. Keep it that way. Morrison probably just needs someone to cook and clean, nothing more. Men like him don't marry shop girls with nothing to offer. The words cut deep, but Mercy had learned not to show pain when her father wanted to hurt her. Instead, she nodded obediently and began planning how to pack 17 years of life into the small cloth bag under her bed. That evening, Mrs. Henderson stopped by with fresh bread and news from town. When Silas stepped outside to tend to his horse, the older woman moved close to Mercy. I heard about the Morrison job, she whispered. That's good news, dear. Caleb's a decent man, quiet but honorable. His ranch is clean, and he treats his animals with kindness. You know him well? Mercy asked. Well enough. He bought the land from my husband 2 years ago. Always pays fair, never causes trouble. The important thing is, he's nothing like... She glanced toward the door where Silas had disappeared. Nothing like some men. Relief washed over Mercy like cool water. Mrs. Henderson was the closest thing to a mother she'd had since her own mama died. If she trusted Caleb Morrison, maybe Mercy could too. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of course you are, honey. But sometimes being scared is better than being destroyed. And you're stronger than you know. Mrs. Henderson pressed a small wrapped package into Mercy's hands. For your new start. Inside the cloth was a bar of lavender soap, the kind wealthy ladies bought from back east. Mercy had never owned anything so beautiful or sweet-smelling. I can't take this, she protested. You can and you will. Every woman deserves to feel beautiful, especially when she's being brave. When Silas returned, Mrs. Henderson was gone, but the smell of lavender lingered on Mercy's skin like a promise. That night, she packed her few belongings by candlelight. Her mother's yellow dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper. 2 other dresses, both patched but clean. Her few undergarments and her mother's silver brush, the only valuable thing she owned. At the bottom of the bag, she placed Mrs. Henderson's soap and a small photograph of her mother. Looking at Mama's young, smiling face, Mercy wondered what advice she would give about trusting a stranger with storm-gray eyes. Help me be brave, Mama, she whispered to the photograph. Help me choose right. Outside her window, the prairie wind whispered through the grass, and for the first time in years, it sounded like an answer instead of a warning. Sunday morning arrived with golden sunlight and the sound of a wagon rolling into Cedar Falls. Mercy pressed her face to the store window and watched Caleb Morrison climb down from the driver's seat, moving with the same careful grace she remembered. Her cloth bag sat ready by the door, holding everything she owned in the world. Remember what I told you, Silas warned, appearing behind her like a storm cloud. You work hard, you send money home, and you come back every Sunday. Step out of line, and there will be consequences. Mercy nodded, her throat too tight for words. When Caleb knocked on the door, she opened it with trembling hands. Good morning, Miss Whitfield, he said, removing his hat. Are you ready? She's ready, Silas answered before Mercy could speak. He handed Caleb a piece of paper. That's our agreement. She works for you 6 days, comes home Sundays. Wages get sent to me for safekeeping. Caleb read the paper carefully, his jaw tightening slightly. Miss Whitfield is old enough to handle her own wages, don't you think? She's my daughter, Silas said firmly. I'll decide what's best for her. Of course. Caleb's voice stayed polite, but Mercy caught something else underneath. Disappointment, maybe even anger. Shall we go, Miss Whitfield? Mercy picked up her bag and followed him to the wagon. As Caleb helped her onto the wooden seat, his hands were gentle and steady. She had never been touched without fear before, and the strange feeling made her dizzy. Goodbye, Papa, she called back to the store. Silas didn't answer. He was already walking back inside, probably to count the money he expected to receive. As the wagon rolled away from Cedar Falls, Mercy felt like she was leaving one world and entering another. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, grass moving in waves under the morning breeze. Hawks circled overhead, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. Nervous? Caleb asked after they had traveled in silence for several minutes. A little, Mercy admitted. That's natural. Change is always scary, even good change. He guided the horses around a deep rut in the road. Can I ask you something? Mercy tensed. What? That agreement your father made me sign. Do you agree with it? The part about him handling your wages. The question surprised her. No one had ever asked what she wanted before. I don't know much about money, she said carefully. Papa has always handled business matters. But it's your work earning the wages. Seems like you should have some say in how they're used. Mercy stared at her hands folded in her lap. The idea of controlling her own money was as foreign as the idea of flying. What would I do with money anyway? Save it. Buy things you need or want. Maybe use it to make choices about your future. Choices. The word sounded magical and impossible. Mercy had never made a real choice in her life. Everything had always been decided for her. What to wear, what to eat, when to speak, when to stay silent. What kind of choices? She asked. Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Well, you might decide to learn reading and writing better. Or buy yourself a new dress. Or maybe save up enough to travel somewhere you've always wanted to see. I can read and write, Mercy said, a little defensively. I'm sure you can. I just meant if you wanted to learn more. Maybe read books or newspapers from back east. Books. Mercy had seen them in the store sometimes. Thick volumes with gold letters on their spines. But reading was for wealthy people, not for girls like her. I never had time for books. Well, you'll have more time now. My ranch is peaceful, and once the day's work is done, the evenings are your own. The idea of free time was almost as strange as the idea of choice. Mercy had never had an evening that belonged only to her. They topped a small hill, and Caleb pointed ahead. There it is. Home. Mercy gasped at the sight below them. The ranch house was small but well-built, with a covered porch and windows that sparkled clean in the sunlight. A red barn stood nearby, surrounded by fenced pastures where horses grazed peacefully. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided shade and the sound of moving water. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's not much yet, but it has potential. Caleb's voice held pride and hope. I want to build it into something lasting, something that matters. As they drew closer, Mercy could see the careful attention to detail everywhere. The fence posts were straight and strong. The vegetable garden was neat and weed-free. Even the barn had been painted recently, its red walls bright against the green grass. You did all this yourself? She asked. Mostly. Had some help with the barn raising, but the rest I built with my own hands. He pulled the wagon up to the front porch. Takes patience, but anything worth having usually does. Caleb helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the porch. Let me show you around before we settle you in. The inside of the house was clean and simple. The main room had a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with books. Real books, more than Mercy had ever seen in one place. The kitchen's through here, Caleb said, leading her to a sunny room with a cast-iron stove and windows overlooking the creek. I'm not much of a cook, so I'll appreciate having someone who knows what they're doing. I can cook, Mercy said. I've been making meals since I was 7. Good. Your room is upstairs. It's small, but it has a good view and plenty of privacy. He led her up a narrow staircase to a tiny room under the eaves. It had a single bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the pastures. Wildflowers had been placed on the dresser in a mason jar, filling the room with sweet scent. Did you pick those? Mercy asked, touching one of the yellow petals. Caleb's face reddened slightly. Thought it might make the room more welcoming. If you don't like them, I can. No, please. They're perfect. Mercy had never had flowers in her room before. She had never had her own room before, for that matter. "I'll let you get settled," Caleb said. "Come down when you're ready, and we can talk about how things work around here." After he left, Mercy sat on the edge of the bed and looked around her new space. For the first time in her life, she could close a door and be truly alone. No one would burst in angry or drunk. No one would demand explanations for where she was or what she was thinking. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the small closet and placing her mother's photograph on the dresser next to the wildflowers. The lavender soap went in the top drawer, saving its sweetness for special occasions. When she came downstairs, she found Caleb reading at the kitchen table. He looked up with a smile that reached his storm-gray eyes. "All settled?" "Yes, thank you. The room is wonderful." "Good. Are you hungry?" "I was about to start lunch, but I should warn you. My cooking tends to be basic." "I can make lunch," Mercy offered. "If you show me where everything is." "That would be appreciated." As Mercy moved around the kitchen, learning where Caleb kept his supplies, she felt something she had never experienced before. She felt useful in a good way, not because someone would hurt her if she wasn't, but because someone genuinely appreciated her help. "This feels different," she said without thinking. "What does?" "Working, cooking, being helpful." She paused, stirring the soup she was making. "At home, I had to do everything perfectly or there would be trouble. Here, you seem happy just to have help at all." Caleb set down his book and looked at her seriously. "Mercy, I want you to understand something. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to work, yes, but also to have a chance at something better. If you make mistakes, we'll figure out how to fix them. If you need time to learn something new, you'll have it. And if you're ever unhappy here, you can leave." The word leave hung in the air between them. Mercy had never been told she could leave anywhere before. Choice again. That magical, impossible thing. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked quietly. Caleb was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with memory. "Because I know what it's like to live without kindness. I know what it does to a person's spirit. And I think everyone deserves a chance to find out who they really are when they're not afraid." Outside the kitchen window, the prairie wind moved through the cottonwood trees, and Mercy realized she was no longer afraid of the sound. For the first time in her life, the wind sounded like freedom. But deep in her heart, she wondered, could a person really change? Could someone who had spent 17 years being afraid ever learn to be brave? Lightning split the black sky like a knife cutting through cloth, and Mercy dove under the kitchen table as thunder shook the ranch house to its bones. The storm had rolled in fast across the prairie, turning day into night and filling the air with the smell of rain and electricity. "It's just weather." Caleb's voice came from somewhere above her hiding place. "Just noise and light. Can't hurt you in here." But Mercy couldn't stop shaking. The sound of thunder was too much like her father's voice when he was really angry, too much like the sound of his boots stomping across the floor before his belt came off. She pressed her hands over her ears and made herself as small as possible. "My father." The words came out broken and scared. "When he'd drink, the house would shake when he got mad. I'd hide under tables and in closets, but he'd always find me." She felt rather than saw Caleb kneel down beside the table. He didn't try to pull her out or tell her she was being silly. He just stayed there, patient and quiet, like he was waiting for a scared animal to trust him. "He hurt you," Caleb said. It wasn't a question. Mercy nodded, still shaking. "Belt, fists, whatever was close by. Said I was the reason Mama died. Said I was the reason nothing good ever happened to him." "My father was the same way," Caleb said quietly. "Started when I was about 6. Belt, riding crop, sometimes just his hands. Told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything." Mercy's hands slowly came away from her ears. "Your father died when I was 15. I left home the next day and never looked back. That's why I came west, to get far enough away that his voice couldn't follow me." Another crack of thunder made Mercy flinch, but this time she didn't cover her ears. "Does it still scare you? The memories?" "Sometimes. But I learned something important out here on the prairie. The storm always passes. Always. And when it's over, the air smells clean and the grass grows greener. Slowly, carefully, Mercy crawled out from under the table. Caleb was sitting on the floor beside it, his back against the kitchen wall. His storm-gray eyes were gentle, understanding. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm not usually such a coward." "You're not a coward, Mercy. You're someone who survived something terrible. That takes more courage than most people will ever need." They sat together on the kitchen floor as the storm raged outside. Mercy found herself talking about things she had never told anyone. How she used to hide her mother's picture so her father wouldn't tear it up when he was drunk. How she learned to cook by watching through the crack in her bedroom door. How she sometimes pretended her mother was still alive and talking to her. "What was she like?" Caleb asked. "Your mother. Kind. She used to sing while she worked these old songs her grandmother taught her. She never raised her voice, never hit me, never made me feel like I was a burden." Mercy's voice grew thick with tears. "I think about her every day. Wonder what she'd think about me leaving Papa. About me being here with you. What do you think she'd say?" Mercy considered this. "I think she'd tell me to be brave. To choose the life that makes me feel safe and happy instead of the one that makes me feel small and scared." Outside, the thunder was moving away, becoming a distant rumble instead of a roar. The rain still fell, but gently now, pattering against the windows like tiny fingers. "I have something to show you," Caleb said. He got up and went to a wooden chest in the corner of the kitchen. From inside, he pulled out a photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "My mother," he explained. "She died when I was 12, just before my father got really bad. I carry this everywhere to remind me that love exists, even when it feels like the world is full of nothing but anger and hurt." Mercy looked at the photograph, seeing the resemblance in Caleb's eyes and the shape of his mouth. "She looks like she was wonderful." "She was. And I think she would have liked you." Caleb put the photograph away carefully. "Sometimes I talk to her picture, ask her for advice when things get hard." "And what does she tell you?" Caleb smiled, the first real smile Mercy had seen from him. "She tells me that kindness is never wasted, that everyone deserves a second chance, and that love is the only thing that really matters in the end." The storm had passed completely now, leaving behind the fresh, clean smell of rain-washed air. Mercy stood and looked out the kitchen window. The prairie grass bent and swayed in the gentle breeze, and puddles reflected the first stars appearing in the clearing sky. "I want to learn to not be afraid," she said suddenly. "I want to learn to trust that good things can happen to me." "They already are happening," Caleb said, moving to stand beside her at the window. "You left a place that hurt you. You're earning your own money. You have your own room, your own space. Those are all good things. And I met you," Mercy added quietly. Their eyes met in the reflection of the window glass. Something passed between them in that moment, something warm and hopeful and terrifying. Mercy had never felt anything like it before. This flutter in her chest, this desire to move closer instead of backing away. "Mercy," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. But before he could say whatever was on his mind, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the prairie. Someone was riding hard toward the ranch, and at this time of night, after a storm, that usually meant trouble. Caleb grabbed his rifle from above the door and peered out into the darkness. "Can't make out who it is yet, but they're coming fast." Mercy's stomach dropped. Only one person would ride out here in the dark, in the rain, with such urgency. "It's Papa," she whispered. "Something's wrong, or he's coming to take me back." The rider was close enough now that they could see it was indeed Silas Whitfield. His horse lathered with sweat and his face twisted with rage. He pulled up in front of the house and swung down from his saddle, stumbling slightly. "Morrison," he shouted. "I know she's in there. Send out my daughter." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Stay inside," he told Mercy. "Let me handle this." But as he opened the door to face Silas, Mercy realized that the scared girl who had hidden under the table was gone. In her place stood someone who had tasted freedom and wasn't willing to give it up without a fight. The question was, Would Caleb's kindness be enough to protect them both from the storm that was Silas Whitfield's anger? She belongs to me. Silas's voice cut through the quiet night air like a rusty blade. He stood swaying in the mud, whiskey on his breath and fury in his bloodshot eyes. My own daughter, living in sin with a stranger. The whole town's talking. Mercy stepped onto the porch beside Caleb, her heart hammering but her voice steady. I'm not living in sin, Papa. I'm working just like we agreed. Working? Silas laughed, a harsh sound that made the horses in the pasture stamp nervously. Is that what you call it? Mrs. Patterson came by the store today, full of gossip about how cozy you two looked in that wagon. Said you were sitting close enough to be sweethearts. Heat flooded Mercy's cheeks, but she lifted her chin. Mrs. Patterson sees what she wants to see. Mr. Morrison has been nothing but respectful. Respectful men don't steal other men's daughters. Silas took a step closer, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. Respectful men don't break up families. Caleb moved slightly in front of Mercy, his rifle held low but ready. Nobody's been stolen, Whitfield. Your daughter works here by her own choice, following an agreement you signed. My choice? Silas's face turned purple. She's 17 years old. She doesn't get to make choices. I'm old enough to work for wages, Mercy said, surprising herself with her boldness. Old enough to decide where I want to be. You're old enough for a beating if you keep talking back to me. Silas started forward, but stopped when Caleb raised the rifle. That's far enough, Caleb said quietly. No one's getting beaten on my land. The three of them stood frozen in a triangle of tension. Rain dripping from the porch roof and the smell of violence thick in the air. Mercy could see her father calculating, weighing his anger against Caleb's gun. You think you're better than me? Silas snarled. You think because you've got land and money you can take whatever you want? I think every person has the right to choose their own path, Caleb replied. Your daughter chose to work here. I chose to offer her a job. Neither of us needs your permission for that. She's my blood. My responsibility. Responsibility. Mercy's voice cracked like a whip. The word had broken something loose inside her. Some dam that had been holding back 17 years of hurt and anger. Is that what you call it when you hit me for breathing too loud? When you blame me for Mama's death? When you make me feel like I'm worth less than dirt? Silas's mouth fell open. His daughter had never talked back to him before, never stood up straight and looked him in the eye with anything but fear. You ungrateful. I was grateful. Mercy stepped forward, her hands shaking but her voice growing stronger. I was grateful for every day you didn't hit me, every meal you didn't throw in my face, every night you passed out before you could find something to be angry about. But that's not love, Papa. That's not family. That's just surviving. Your mother would be ashamed of you, Silas said, playing his cruelest card. But instead of crumpling, Mercy straightened her shoulders. No, Mama would be proud that I finally found the courage to leave. She would be happy that someone treats me with kindness instead of fists. This isn't over, Silas growled, backing toward his horse. You'll come crawling back when you realize what the real world is like. And when you do, don't expect me to take you in. I won't be crawling back, Mercy said quietly. I won't be coming back at all. Silas mounted his horse and wheeled it around. You're dead to me, he shouted over his shoulder. Dead? You hear me? As the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, Mercy sank down onto the porch steps. Her whole body was trembling, but not with fear this time. She felt empty and full at the same time, like something heavy had been cut out of her chest, leaving room for her lungs to expand properly for the first time in years. You did it, Caleb said, sitting down beside her. You stood up to him. I can't believe I said those things. Mercy's voice was barely a whisper. I've never talked back to him before. Never. How does it feel? Mercy considered the question seriously. Scary, but also free. Like I was carrying a heavy stone and finally set it down. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Crickets chirped in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the stars. He said I was dead to him, Mercy finally said. Are you sorry about that? No. The answer surprised her. I thought I would be, but I'm not. He stopped being my father a long time ago. Now it's just official. Caleb turned to look at her, his storm-gray eyes serious in the moonlight. What will you do now? You can't go back to town. People will talk, and your father will make trouble. I don't know. Mercy felt a flutter of panic. She had burned her bridges without thinking about what came next. I suppose I could try to find work in another town, somewhere he can't find me. Or, Caleb said carefully, you could stay here. You mean keep working for you? I mean, Caleb took a deep breath. I mean stay here as more than just hired help. Stay here as my partner. My wife if you'll have me. Mercy's heart stopped. What? I know it's sudden. I know we barely know each other. But Mercy, I've never met anyone like you. You're strong and kind and brave even when you don't feel brave. And I hope, that maybe you could learn to care for me the way I'm learning to care for you. Mercy stared at him, her mind reeling. Marriage. A real home. A life where she was wanted instead of tolerated. I don't know anything about being a wife, she said. I don't know much about being a husband. We could learn together. What if I'm too damaged? What if I can't love properly because of how I was raised? Caleb reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady. Love isn't something you do perfectly from the start. It's something you practice, something you choose every day. And I think you've got more love in you than you realize. Mercy looked down at their joined hands, at the calluses on his fingers from honest work, at the gentle way he held her like she was something precious. Would you be patient with me? She asked. If I get scared, if I flinch when you move too fast, if I don't know how to trust? As patient as you need me to be. And you'd never raise your hand to me? Never. Caleb's voice was fierce with promise. I'd cut off my own arm before I'd hurt you. Mercy believed him. Looking into his eyes, she saw the same loneliness she felt, the same hope for something better. Maybe two broken people could heal each other. Maybe love really was possible even for someone like her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll try to learn how to love and be loved. Caleb's smile was like the sun coming up after the longest night of the year. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, sealing the promise between them. In the distance, thunder rumbled again. But this time Mercy wasn't afraid. This time, she knew the storm would pass, and when it did, the air would smell like new beginnings. But first, they would have to face whatever tomorrow brought. And in a place like the Nebraska Territory, tomorrow could bring anything at all. Sheriff Tom Bradley's badge caught the morning sunlight as he rode up to the ranch with a face full of bad news and a piece of paper in his hand. Mercy watched from the kitchen window as Caleb walked out to meet him, and her stomach twisted with the same fear she'd felt as a child when adult voices turned serious and low. "Morning, Caleb," the sheriff said, not bothering to get down from his horse. "I'm sorry to be here, but I've got legal papers to serve." Mercy dried her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch. Sheriff Bradley had known her since she was small, had sometimes bought supplies from her father's store. He was a good man, but the law was the law, and good men sometimes had to do things they didn't like. "What kind of papers?" Caleb asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "Silas filed charges yesterday. Says you kidnapped his daughter, forced her to stay here against her will." Sheriff Bradley's weathered face looked pained. "Claims she's been held here for immoral purposes." Mercy felt like she'd been slapped. "That's not true, Sheriff Bradley. You know that's not true. I believe you, child. But believing you and what I can prove in court are two different things." He handed the paper to Caleb. "Says here that Miss Whitfield is under 21 and unmarried, which makes her father her legal guardian. The law says she has to come back with me." "No." The word came out of Mercy's mouth like a physical force. "I won't go back to him. I won't." Sheriff Bradley removed his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Mercy, I understand your feelings, but do you? Mercy stepped down from the porch, her hands balled into fists. Do you understand what it's like to live with someone who hits you for sport? Who blames you for things that happened before you were even born? Who makes you feel like you're worth less than the dirt on his boots? The sheriff's face went pale. Has your father has he hurt you? Look at me, Sheriff Bradley. Really look. Mercy turned her face so he could see the fading bruises, the way she held herself like someone expecting a blow. I've been covering up marks and making excuses my whole life. Everyone in town knows, but nobody talks about it because it's family business. Sheriff Bradley stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. Even if that's true, the law is clear. Unless you're married, your father has legal rights over you. Then marry me. The words tumbled out of Caleb's mouth before he could stop them. Right now. Today. Mercy turned to stare at him. They had talked about marriage last night, but in the emotion of the moment, she hadn't really believed it would happen. Now, faced with the choice between Caleb and her father's fists, the decision seemed both desperate and perfectly clear. You sure about this, son? Sheriff Bradley asked. Marriage is a serious thing. Can't be undone easy. I'm sure, Caleb said, looking directly at Mercy. The question is whether Miss Whitfield is sure. Mercy thought about the lavender soap Mrs. Henderson had given her, still sitting unused in her dresser drawer. She thought about the wildflowers Caleb had put in her room, about the way he said her name like it was something valuable. She thought about the books on his shelves and the gentle way he spoke to his horses and the promise in his storm-gray eyes. I'm sure, she said. Sheriff Bradley looked between them, calculating. I can perform the ceremony. Got the authority to do it. But are you doing this because you want to? Or because you're scared of your father? Both, Mercy answered honestly. I'm scared of Papa, yes, but I also care for Caleb and I think he cares for me. Maybe that's not the romantic love the storybooks talk about, but it's real, and it's more than I've ever had before. And you, Caleb? You're not just rescuing her out of pity. Caleb stepped closer to Mercy, close enough that she could smell the soap he'd used that morning and see the sincerity in his eyes. I'd be lying if I said this wasn't happening faster than I planned, but I'd also be lying if I said I hadn't hoped for it. Mercy is brave and kind and strong, and I'd be honored to have her as my wife. Sheriff Bradley nodded slowly. All right then. If you're both certain, we can do this legal and proper. But I'll need a witness. Mrs. Henderson, Mercy said immediately. She's been like a mother to me. If anyone should see me get married, it should be her. I'll ride over and get her, Sheriff Bradley said. Give you two some time to think about what you're doing. Marriage isn't just about escaping one situation. It's about building a life together. You sure you're ready for that? Mercy looked at Caleb, this man who had shown her more kindness in 3 weeks than she'd received in 17 years. He wasn't perfect. She could see the loneliness in him, the scars from his own difficult past. But he was gentle and honest, and he made her feel safe. I'm ready, she said. After Sheriff Bradley left, Mercy and Caleb stood in the sudden quiet of the morning, both of them aware that they were about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Are you scared? Caleb asked. Terrified, Mercy admitted. But not of you. I'm scared of failing, of not knowing how to be a good wife, of disappointing you. You couldn't disappoint me if you tried, Caleb said gently. And as for being a good wife, I figure we'll learn together. Neither of us had good examples growing up. Mercy nodded, thinking about the parents they'd both lost. His to death and drink, hers to death and cruelty. What if we don't know how to love each other properly? Then we'll practice until we get it right. Caleb reached for her hand, his fingers warm and steady. Love isn't something that happens all at once like in the storybooks. It's something that grows like plants in a garden. You tend it, you water it, you give it time and patience, and eventually it blooms. Have you ever been in love before? Mercy asked. No. Have you? No. But I know what it feels like to be cared for now, thanks to you. And I think that's a good place to start. They spent the next hour preparing for their wedding. Mercy changed into her mother's yellow dress, the one she'd been saving for a special occasion that she'd never thought would come. Caleb put on his best shirt and tried to tame his sandy hair with water and determination. When Sheriff Bradley returned with Mrs. Henderson, the older woman took one look at Mercy and burst into tears. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling Mercy into a fierce hug. "You look just like your mother did on her wedding day. She would be so proud of you for being brave enough to choose happiness." "Are you sure this is right?" Mercy whispered. "Marrying someone I barely know?" Mrs. Henderson held her at arm's length, studying her face. "Do you trust him?" "Yes." "Does he make you feel safe?" "Yes." "Does he treat you with respect and kindness?" "Yes." "Then you know him well enough. The rest, the deep love, the shared dreams, the comfort of long companionship, that all comes with time if you're both willing to work for it." As they gathered in Caleb's simple living room for the ceremony, Mercy felt a strange sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't the wedding she dreamed of as a little girl, but those dreams had been based on fairy tales. This was real life with real choices and real consequences. "Ready?" Sheriff Bradley asked, opening his worn prayer book. Mercy looked at Caleb, standing beside her in his clean shirt and nervous smile. In a few minutes, she would be Mrs. Morrison, legally free from her father's control and legally bound to this gentleman who had offered her a chance at something better. "Ready," she said, and meant it. But as Sheriff Bradley began to speak the words that would change her life forever, the sound of horses approaching fast made them all freeze. Through the window, they could see riders coming hard across the prairie. More than one, moving with purpose and anger. Silas Whitfield had not come alone this time. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." Sheriff Bradley's voice faltered as the thunder of hoofbeats grew louder outside the ranch house. Through the window, they could see 4 men riding hard across the prairie, led by Silas Whitfield with murder in his eyes. "Keep going," Caleb said firmly, positioning himself between Mercy and the door. "Finish the ceremony. We are gathered here in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony," Sheriff Bradley continued, speaking faster now. The riders were close enough that they could hear Silas shouting orders to the men with him. "Morrison, send out my daughter or we'll come in and get her." Mrs. Henderson moved protectively closer to Mercy, whose hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold them still. The yellow dress that had seemed so perfect moments before now felt like a target, marking her as the cause of all this trouble. "Do you, Caleb Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Sheriff Bradley's voice was steady despite the chaos building outside. "I do," Caleb said, never taking his eyes off Mercy's face. "Do you, Mercy Whitfield, take this man?" The door exploded inward as Silas and 3 other men burst into the house. Mercy recognized them. Jake Potter from the saloon, Bill Mason who sometimes helped load supplies at the store, and Tom Garrett, a drifter who did odd jobs when he wasn't drinking. "Stop this nonsense right now," Silas roared, his face purple with rage and whiskey. "That's my daughter you're trying to steal." "This is a legal wedding ceremony," Sheriff Bradley said, closing his prayer book but keeping his hand near his gun. "You're interrupting official business." "Legal?" Silas laughed harshly. "Nothing about this is legal. She's 17 years old and I never gave permission for any marriage." "She doesn't need your permission if she's 18, Caleb said quietly. "She's not 18 till October," Silas snarled. "And even if she was, no decent man marries a girl he's been keeping as his whore." Mercy gasped as if she'd been slapped. The word hung in the air like poison, making her feel dirty and ashamed even though she'd done nothing wrong. "You take that back," Caleb said, his voice deadly quiet. "Why? It's true, isn't it? You've had her living here, cooking your meals, warming your bed." Caleb's fist connected with Silas's jaw with a sound like splitting wood. Silas staggered backward into Jake Potter, blood flowing from his split lip. "She's been nothing but proper," Caleb said, shaking the pain from his knuckles. "More proper than you deserve, considering how you've treated her." "You son of a—" Silas lunged forward, but Sheriff Bradley stepped between them, his gun now drawn. "That's enough." This is still my county, and I won't have brawling in a decent man's home. Decent? Silas wiped blood from his mouth. There's nothing decent about a man who steals another man's daughter. I wasn't stolen, Mercy said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I left. I chose to leave because staying with you was killing me piece by piece. You ungrateful little? Silas started toward her, but Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, surprising everyone. Silas Whitfield, you should be ashamed of yourself, she said, her voice crackling with authority. Everyone in this county knows how you've treated that poor girl. The bruises, the fear, the way she flinches when anyone raises their voice. We've all seen it and done nothing, and we should all be ashamed. Stay out of this, woman. This is family business. Family? Mrs. Henderson's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You call it family when you beat a child for breathing wrong? When you blame her for her mother's death? When you make her feel like she's worth less than the dirt under your boots? Murmurs came from the men behind Silas. Even Jake Potter, who wasn't known for his moral sensitivity, looked uncomfortable. Is that true, Silas? Bill Mason asked. You been hitting the girl? She needed discipline. A man has the right to control his own household. Not like that, Tom Garrett said quietly. My pa was heavy-handed too, but this... He looked at Mercy's bruised face and shook his head. This ain't right. Mercy felt something shift in the room. The men who had come to support Silas were starting to see him clearly, perhaps for the first time. The picture he'd painted of an innocent daughter stolen by a wicked man was cracking apart under the weight of truth. The ceremony was legal, Sheriff Bradley announced firmly. I witnessed Miss Whitfield consent freely without coercion. As of this moment, she's Mrs. Caleb Morrison, with all the rights and protections that marriage provides. No! Silas's voice cracked like a whip. I don't accept this. She's my daughter. She was your daughter, Mercy said, stepping forward with her chin raised high. But you threw that away the first time you hit me. You threw it away every time you told me I was worthless. You threw it away when you chose whiskey over love, anger over kindness. Your mother would be ashamed. My mother would be proud that I finally found the courage to leave. Mercy's voice rang through the house like a bell. She would be happy that someone treats me with gentleness instead of fists. She would be glad that I chose love over fear. Silas stared at his daughter, his former daughter, seeing perhaps for the first time the woman she had become. The scared little girl who used to cower at his voice was gone, replaced by someone who could stand straight and speak truth even when it hurt. If you ever come here again, Caleb said quietly, if you ever threaten my wife or try to hurt her, I'll be ready for you. And next time, I won't stop with one punch. This isn't over, Silas muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. The men who had come with him were already backing toward the door. Their enthusiasm for his cause evaporated. Yes, it is, Mercy said with finality. It's been over for a long time. I just finally had the courage to admit it. As Silas and his supporters rode away, defeated and deflated, Mercy sank into a chair. The confrontation had drained her, but underneath the exhaustion, she felt something new, peace. Well, Sheriff Bradley said, holstering his gun. That was the most exciting wedding I've ever performed, but it was legal and binding, despite the interruption. Mrs. Henderson hugged Mercy tightly. You did it, dear. You stood up to him. You chose your own path. We did it, Mercy corrected, looking at Caleb with eyes full of gratitude and something that might, in time, become love. We chose together. As the sun set over the Nebraska prairie, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison sat on their porch, legally married and finally free. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of rain and new beginnings. What happens now? Mercy asked. Now we build a life together, Caleb said, taking her hand. One day at a time, one choice at a time, until someday we wake up and realize we've created something beautiful. In the distance, thunder rumbled again, but this time Mercy smiled. She had learned that storms always pass, and when they do, the world smells clean and full of possibility. The question now wasn't whether she was brave enough to face the future. It was what kind of future she and Caleb would build together. 6 months after the wedding, Mercy Morrison stood in the general store in Cedar Falls, her head held high despite the whispers that followed her like shadows. She wore a new blue dress that Caleb had bought her for Christmas, and her hair was clean and shining in a way it never had when she lived with her father. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Mrs. Patterson said loudly enough for half the store to hear. The runaway bride herself, shopping like a respectable woman. Mercy's cheeks burned, but she didn't duck her head or hurry toward the door like she once would have. Instead, she turned to face the older woman with a calm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," she said politely. "How are your children doing?" The unexpected kindness seemed to throw Mrs. Patterson off balance. She had clearly been expecting shame or anger, not grace under pressure. They're fine," she stammered. "That's wonderful to hear," Mercy said, then turned back to her shopping as if the woman hadn't just tried to embarrass her in public. As she gathered supplies for the ranch, Mercy was aware of the conversations that stopped when she walked by, the curious glances, the way some people smiled while others frowned. Being married to Caleb had given her legal protection, but it hadn't made the gossip disappear. "Mercy!" A soft voice behind her made her turn. Emma Foster, a girl about her own age, stood nervously clutching a basket. "I just wanted to say, I think you're brave." "Brave?" Mercy set down the bag of flour she'd been examining. "For leaving. For choosing something better." Emma glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then stepped closer. "My father. He's not as bad as yours was, but he's not kind either. Sometimes I dream about having the courage to do what you did." Mercy felt her heart squeeze with sympathy. She recognized the look in Emma's eyes, the careful way she held herself, the way she checked who might be listening before speaking honestly. "It wasn't courage at first," Mercy said quietly. "It was just fear of staying being stronger than fear of leaving. But maybe that's what courage really is, being more afraid of the wrong thing than the right thing." "How did you know? How did you know Mr. Morrison would be different?" Mercy considered the question seriously. "I didn't know for certain, but he was kind when he didn't have to be, patient when I was scared, and he never made me feel small or stupid. Sometimes you have to trust that kindness is real, even when you've never seen much of it before." Emma nodded, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I'm glad you found happiness, Mercy. You deserve it." As Emma hurried away, Mercy felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Her story had become more than just her own. It was an example for other young women who might be suffering in silence. That was both a gift and a burden she hadn't expected. "Mrs. Morrison?" The store clerk, a young man named Peter, approached with her total written on a slip of paper. "That'll be $4.60. Mercy counted out the money from her own small purse. Money she had earned and saved, money that belonged to her alone. The simple act of paying for her own purchases still felt like a small miracle. As she loaded her supplies into the wagon outside, she noticed a familiar figure stumbling down the street. Silas Whitfield looked older than his years, his clothes dirty and his face unshaven. He moved like a man who had been drinking since breakfast, which, knowing him, he probably had. Their eyes met across the dusty street. For a moment, Mercy felt a flicker of the old fear, the instinct to look away and make herself invisible. But then she thought of Emma's words about courage, about choosing something better. Instead of looking away, she nodded once. Not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. "I see you," the gesture said, "but you no longer have power over me." Silas stared at her for a long moment, taking in her clean dress, her confident posture, the wedding ring that caught the sunlight. Whatever he saw there made him turn away first, shuffling into the saloon like a man defeated. On the ride back to the ranch, Mercy found herself thinking about the conversation with Emma. How many other women in Cedar Falls were trapped in situations like hers had been? How many were too scared to leave, too convinced of their own worthlessness to believe anything better was possible? When she reached home, she found Caleb in the barn, working with a young horse that had been skittish since they'd bought it. He moved slowly, patiently, speaking in low, calm tones until the animal began to trust him enough to accept a bridle. "You're good at that," Mercy said, watching from the doorway. "Scared things need patience," Caleb replied, stroking the horse's neck. "They need to learn that gentle hands exist before they can stop expecting cruel ones." "Is that what you did with me?" Caleb turned to look at her, his storm-gray eyes warm with affection. "You were never broken, Mercy. You were just careful. And you had every right to be." That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Mercy told Caleb about her encounter with Emma Foster. "I think there are others like I was," she said. "Others who need to know that leaving is possible." "What are you thinking?" "I don't know yet. Maybe just being visible, being proof that things can change. Maybe talking to girls like Emma when I can." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that the church has been talking about starting a women's group. Maybe that would be a way to help. "You wouldn't mind? People already whisper about us enough." "Let them whisper," Caleb said firmly. "We know the truth about our marriage, about our life together. If you want to help other women find their courage, I'll support you however I can." Mercy felt a warm glow spread through her chest. This was what partnership felt like. Not one person making all the decisions, but two people choosing their path together. "There's something else," she said. "Something I've been thinking about for weeks." "What's that?" "I want to learn to read better. Really read, not just the simple words I know now. I want to read those books on your shelves. Maybe even write letters to women in other towns who might need encouragement." Caleb's face lit up with excitement. "I'd love to teach you. We could start tonight if you want." As Caleb pulled down a book of poetry from the shelf, Mercy marveled at how her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a scared girl who thought she was worthless. Now she was a woman with plans, with hopes, with the power to make choices about her own future. The wind whispered through the cottonwood trees outside, and for the first time, Mercy understood what it was saying. It was saying that change was possible, that growth never stopped, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was plant seeds for other people's dreams. But as they opened the book and began to read together, a distant sound made them both pause. Hoofbeats on the prairie, coming fast in the darkness. In a place like Nebraska Territory, visitors after sunset usually meant trouble. The question was, what kind of trouble had found them this time? Fire! Fire at the Henderson place. The rider's voice cracked with panic as he pulled up to the ranch house. Young Billy Mason, Bill's son, had ridden hard through the night, his horse lathered with sweat and his face streaked with soot. Mercy and Caleb were already grabbing coats and rushing outside before Billy finished speaking. In the distance, an orange glow lit up the northern sky where the Henderson ranch lay nestled in a valley between rolling hills. "How bad is it?" Caleb asked, saddling his horse with quick, practiced movements. "Bad. Started in the barn, spread to the house. Mr. Henderson got hurt trying to save the animals. Mrs. Henderson sent me to get help from anyone who could come." Mercy's heart clenched. Mrs. Henderson had been like a mother to her, the one person who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. "I'm coming too," she said, moving toward the horse Caleb kept saddled for emergencies. "Mercy, it might be dangerous. Mrs. Henderson was there for me when I needed her most," Mercy said firmly, swinging up into the saddle with the skill she'd learned over the past months. "Now I'll be there for her." The ride to the Henderson place seemed to take forever, though it was only 3 miles across the prairie. As they drew closer, the smell of smoke grew stronger, and they could hear the sound of people shouting, organizing bucket brigades and trying to save what they could. The barn was completely gone. Nothing but glowing embers and twisted metal where it had stood. The house was damaged but still standing, though smoke poured from several windows. People from neighboring ranches had arrived to help, passing buckets of water from the creek in a desperate attempt to keep the fire from spreading further. Mercy found Mrs. Henderson sitting on a blanket beside the creek, holding her husband's hand while Dr. Williams examined burns on his arms and chest. The older woman's face was streaked with tears and soot, but she looked up with desperate relief when she saw Mercy approaching. "Oh, dear heart," Mrs. Henderson said, reaching out to embrace her. "You came." "Of course I came," Mercy said, kneeling beside her. How is Mr. Henderson? Burns on his hands and arms, some smoke in his lungs, but he'll live, Dr. Williams said. He was lucky. Could have been much worse. The animals? Mercy asked. We saved most of them, Mrs. Henderson said. Lost 2 horses and some chickens, but the cattle were in the far pasture. Could have been so much worse. As the night wore on, Mercy found herself naturally taking charge of organizing the women who had come to help. She assigned some to tend the injured, others to prepare food for the firefighters, and still others to salvage what they could from the damaged house. You're good at this? Emma Foster said, appearing at Mercy's elbow with a basket of bandages. Taking charge, getting people organized. I never thought I was good at anything except staying quiet and trying not to get hit, Mercy admitted. But I guess you learn what you're capable of when people need you. That's what courage is, isn't it? Doing what needs to be done even when you're scared. Mercy looked around at the scene of destruction and cooperation, at neighbors helping neighbors despite the late hour and the danger. Maybe courage isn't about not being afraid. Maybe it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. As dawn broke over the prairie, the immediate danger had passed. The fire was out, the injured were being cared for, and plans were already being made to help the Hendersons rebuild. Mercy found herself sitting by the creek with Mrs. Henderson, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I don't know what we'll do, Mrs. Henderson said quietly. We're not young anymore, and starting over seems impossible. You're not starting over alone, Mercy said firmly. The whole community will help, and Caleb and we want to do whatever we can. Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand. You know, when I first met you, you were this scared little girl who jumped at shadows. Look at you now, taking charge, helping people, being strong when others need strength. Your mother would be so proud. Tears blurred Mercy's vision. I learned it from you. You showed me what it meant to be kind, to help others, to be brave when it matters. No, dear, I just recognized what was already inside you. All I did was give you permission to let it out. As the sun climbed higher, people began to head home to tend their own animals and get some rest. But before leaving, each person stopped to offer the Hendersons help. Labor, materials, money, whatever they could spare. We'll start rebuilding next week, Caleb told Mr. Henderson as they prepared to leave. I'll bring my tools and as many men as I can gather. And I'll organize the women to help with food and supplies, Mercy added. No one should have to face something like this alone. On the ride home, Mercy felt a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she had been truly useful. Not because someone forced her to be, but because she chose to be. You were amazing last night, Caleb said. The way you took charge, organized everyone. I've never seen anything like it. I surprised myself, Mercy admitted. I never knew I could do things like that. Maybe that's what growing up really means, Caleb said thoughtfully. Not just getting older, but discovering who you really are when you're not afraid anymore. As they approached their own ranch, Mercy looked out over the rolling prairie grass and felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. A year ago, she had been a scared girl with no choices and no hope. Now she was a woman with a husband who respected her, a community that valued her contributions, and a future full of possibilities. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of rain and new growth. Mercy no longer feared the sound. Instead, she heard it as a promise that change was always possible, that storms could clear the air for new beginnings, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was help others find their own courage to change. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. I'm thinking about writing a letter, Mercy said, to my mother. I know she can't read it, but I want to tell her that I finally understand what she would have wanted for me. Not just safety, but purpose. Not just survival, but a life worth living. And what would you tell her about that life? Mercy smiled, watching a hawk circle high above the prairie. I'd tell her that I learned something important. Worth isn't something other people give you or take away. It's something you discover inside yourself when you're brave enough to look. And once you find it, No one can ever make you lose it again. As they rode toward home together, the prairie wind carried their voices across the endless grass, where other women might hear the story and find the courage to write their own ending. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is prove that change is possible, that love exists, and that everyone, no matter how broken they think they are, deserves a chance to bloom. The wind had changed direction, and it was blowing toward hope.